For many of us who have survived a suicide attempt, it is often kept a secret. In this video, I'll share my coming out story as a suicide attempt survivor with you. This is Speak the Unspeakable, a series focused on suicide prevention through the lens of lived experience. My name is Scott Teichmer. I'm a suicide preventionist and a suicide attempt survivor. So before I share my story with you, I want to first talk about some of the reasons why it can be so hard to talk about suicide, whether experiences of thoughts, of attempt, or of loss. I'll start with the obvious. Discussing experiences of suicide can be painful and highly emotional. It's not something that most of us would view as fun to talk about. And it can require a great deal of emotional vulnerability and courage to discuss. People who have attempted suicide might not talk about it due to fear of being judged, of being shamed, or even of being discriminated against in their personal and professional lives. Some might not talk about it because they don't want to worry or burden or otherwise negatively impact those around them. Also, most people probably don't want to be associated with the numerous pejorative comments that people make about suicide attempts, such as labeling them as attention-seeking, as weak, or selfish, cowardly, or self-centered. Self-imposed shame was probably the one biggest reason that I kept my struggles a secret for so long. I can tell you that for me, talking about my personal experiences has not always been easy. In fact, it's still not. And I've had some major moments of anxiety and panic along the way. But while it has been challenging, it is something I do not regret. How did I get to the point of being able to talk about my experiences of suicidal thoughts and suicide attempt? One of the first things that led me on that path of being able to become public about my attempt happened back in 2014 at an AFSP Out of the Darkness Walk in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now, for those that aren't familiar, AFSP is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and those walks serve as not only their biggest fundraiser, but also creates the opportunity for those impacted by suicide to come together in community. Earlier that year, I had begun working at my county's community mental health agency, and I had also joined our local suicide prevention coalition. But I was still not open about my personal experiences, despite having worked in behavioral health for the prior 4 years. I planned on going to the walk alone just to see what it was like and to get some ideas for what we could do at our annual event back in my community. So my day started out very early as I had biked to the event, which was about 45 miles away from my home. I can remember the sense of relief when I arrived, but I also remember feeling very overwhelmed with a large crowd. Thankfully, I ran into a wonderful couple from my local suicide prevention coalition, one of them being the coalition's chair. We started talking about our connections to suicide and what got us involved in suicide prevention, and that's when my heart palpitations and panic set in. My face must have been completely flushed as I hesitated, deliberated, took a deep breath, and eventually said that I had actually attempted suicide. Outside of my family, and my grandma's entire church, but that's another story, no one else really knew about my suicide attempt. It was a shameful secret that I only shared with a select intimate few. During the day's events, my new friends and I shared smiles, tears, and even a few laughs along the way. They graciously took me in that day and have been such dear friends to me ever since that moment. Now fast forward to the following year, a few coalition members, including the chair, planned on watching a webinar about including lived experience in suicide prevention programs and organizations. The coalition chair and I were actually watching the webinar in a conference room together. Mind you, this was pre-COVID. And as the webinar went on, I remember thinking to myself, does he remember what I disclosed at the walk? I also thought to myself, I don't know if I can come out to my coworkers and community. I felt like a hypocrite for not being out and open, but at the same time, I just didn't know if I had the courage. When the webinar ended, we went our separate ways back to work without discussion of any specific implications of the webinar. With having that reminder pop up at work of that disclosure I had made months ago, I felt a deep sense of fear, of shame, of panic that I might be outed. But I also started to feel a deep sense of responsibility. This personal sense of responsibility continued to grow, and eventually an opportunity arose. Our coalition was partnering with a few other organizations to have 3 simultaneous screenings of a suicide prevention related film with a following panel discussion at each location. And on each panel, we were going to have one survivor of suicide attempt. As we began to solicit community members for our panelists, I did not immediately volunteer. As planning progressed, however, I eventually decided it was time. I no longer wanted to feel like a hypocrite, asking for honesty and vulnerability from others while not doing the same. By the time I told the coalition chair that I would do it, I have to say I was extremely impressed that not once had he put any pressure on me, and it was important that I made that commitment on my own timeline. The film and panel discussion went well. I prepared remarks on the main points that I wanted to get across, and it was also fortifying to know that there were 2 other attempt survivors speaking out at the other screenings. There is strength in numbers. I also had a few friends as well as my mother who showed up for support that night, and it meant a great deal. So I came out to a group of mostly strangers in an auditorium a few miles from my hometown. There was no fanfare, but afterwards a few of us gathered for drinks, and I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. After that first public disclosure, I did have some fears. I wondered what information would spread to former schoolmates in my hometown or to my other coworkers who weren't part of the coalition and weren't present that night. Each public disclosure since then has come with certain challenges, but it does get easier. I believe that in many ways, shame leads to silence and silence leads to more shame, but we can break that cycle. If you have been impacted by suicide, whether you've personally experienced thoughts of suicide or survived a suicide attempt, if you've supported a loved one who's struggled, or if you have lost a loved one to suicide, I hope that when you hear my story, you can also feel that strength in numbers. So let us be vulnerable, let us be courageous, and let us support one another by speaking the unspeakable together.
If you like this video, comment, click subscribe, and give a like below. Take a deep breath, now let it out, roll your shoulders back, and hold your head up high. Speak